Hello, crafty friends, and welcome to my very first WIP Chat. If you're new here, my name is Jessie. This is Mislaid Pages. This is my channel where I talk about all of my crafty goodness, and I've just recently started doing diamond painting on the channel. That's what you're watching, and if you hear noises in the background, my cats are going a little crazy, like they do. But what you're seeing on the screen is me working on a new diamond painting that I just kitted up recently. You can see that video on my channel as well. This is Hamsa White Elephant from Diamondardtclub. So that's what you will see me working on during this voiceover. So I hope you enjoy watching me as I diamond paint. So this is, again, the very first time that I have done a WIP Chat like this. So hopefully the camera angle is good. I'm not really sure how my setup needs to go. So it's all very experimental at the moment. So I thought, since this is the very first time I've done a WIP Chat, that I would do some getting to know you kind of questions, just because I haven't done anything like that on my channel so far. I do have a bunch of new folks that have joined over the last couple of weeks, and even for the folks who've been here for a while, I haven't actually done anything like this. So let's do some getting to know you questions. I'm not pulling these all from one specific tag. I'm pulling these from several different places, so bear with me if there's pauses while I'm looking up new questions. I didn't want to do one of those tags where it's obvious that that the questions are all written by much younger folks, like folks still in high school and stuff. So I'm a little bit past that in my life, and I don't want to answer high school questions. So so let's get started. So I already said my name is Jessie. I am 40 and I'll just go ahead and put that out there. I am 40. I am married. I have a wonderful husband named Adam. I have 3 cats who are my children. They are my fur babies. They are Momo, Luna, and Loki. Momo and Loki are both black cats, and Luna is a tortoiseshell tabby, so she's technically a torby. So yeah, those are my 3 babies. I have a stepkid as well. Our stepkid lives with their mom, their biological mom, and our stepkid is non-binary, so their pronouns are they and them. So if you ever hear me talking about my stepkid versus my stepson or daughter, and if you ever hear me referring to them as they, it's because they're non-binary and I respect their gender, so I use the appropriate pronouns. And they are a fantastic kid. They are almost 18, and it's crazy for me to think that they are that old at this point. Excuse me. But yeah, it's fantastic. They are just incredibly creative and artistic. Sorry about that. I got all choked up for some reason. But they are incredibly creative and artistic, and so funny and so intelligent. And just, I really could not have picked a better kid if I had had an order list and checked off all the boxes that I wanted. They are the best kid ever. So I feel very, very lucky. But as I said, they live with their biological mom, and especially with the pandemic, we haven't had a chance to see them at all since March. And you know, so we only get to talk by phone, and that's not enough sometimes. But yeah, so I have my 3 babies, my 4-legged babies, and I have my 1-person baby who lives with their biological mom. And that is pretty much the makeup of our immediate family. I also have 1 brother. He's older and he lives nearby, but he does live in his own place. And that's all of us. That's all of my family. And we're all relatively close together right here. And let's see, I'll get into a question now. So where am I from originally? I am from pretty much right here. So here is Hopewell, Virginia. Hopewell is a little bit south of Richmond, Virginia. And if you're not familiar with Virginia in general, Richmond is the capital of the state, or the capital of the Commonwealth. And Richmond is an hour and a half or so south of Washington, D.C. So we're close to the East Coast, not quite on the East Coast, and we're very close to the state capital and all that fun stuff. So that's where I live now. I have not always lived here, but I was actually born in the hospital that is very close to my house. So I've sort of come full circle in my life. Momo is moving chairs now. So yeah, I've kind of come full circle as far as, you know, where I started out and where I ended up. And the next question is going to be, how did you end up here? So let's talk about this. How did I end up back in Hopewell? So I was born in Hopewell. I lived in Enon, which is a little suburb in between the proper towns of Hopewell and Chesterfield. And I grew up there, lived there until I was 18. There was a brief period, about 4 years, when my family actually lived in Germany. My dad and my mom, okay, let me back up. Both my mother and my dad served in the Army. My mother had to leave the Army when she got pregnant with my brother, because at that time, this was 1967, at that time you were not allowed to be in the military and be pregnant. It did not matter what the circumstances were of your pregnancy. My mother and father had been married for 2 years when she got pregnant with my brother, but because of how the Army worked at that time, she was not allowed to stay enlisted, so she had an honorable discharge when she got pregnant with my brother. So she was retired, but my dad stayed in the military until about 4 years after I was born. So he was still active duty military, and we got stationed in Germany with him when I was a baby. So we lived in Germany for about 4 years after living in Enon. Or actually, I guess we lived in Colonial Heights. Anyway, wherever we lived when I was a teeny baby just born, we moved to Germany, lived there for almost 4 years, came back to the States, and moved to Enon, where we lived until I was 18. My mom and dad continued living there for years after that, but I moved out when I was 18 to go to college. And I lived off campus at college in Richmond. I went to VCU. And I lived off campus for many years before deciding to actually move back to Hopewell. And the whole college experience is a really long, convoluted thing that I'm not going to get into today. But I was in college for a lot of years, a whole lot of years. And ultimately, before I finished, I decided to come back to Hopewell. One, because my apartment situation was awful. The neighbors were crazy loud all the time. There were all kinds of stories. Again, I'm not going to get into all of that right now. It's just way too much. But ultimately, apartment living was not for me. And my stepdad had really convinced me that it was a better decision overall to try to buy a house versus continuing to rent an apartment or a house. So Hopewell is much more affordable in general than the Richmond area. So I came to Hopewell because my stepdad was living there with my mom, and I ended up finding a house like around the corner from where they lived. So so when I was like 23, I think that's when it was. Oh my gosh. When I was like 23, I came to Hopewell, I bought a house, and I lived around the corner from my folks, from my mom and my stepdad. And it was at once the best and possibly the most frustrating thing ever. But at this point, I would not give that up for the world. I would never change that. So, let's see. If you could time travel, would you go to the past or the future? Now, this is kind of a loaded question. So, there's a part of me that wants to talk about going to the future and finding out what's going to happen and blah, blah, blah. But being an adult orphan, because all of my parents have passed, and I say all of my parents because, I have my biological mom, my biological dad, but I also had a stepdad who was as much or more a father as my biological dad was. Not that my bio dad did anything wrong. Just, we had a strained relationship. My stepdad kind of stepped in to fill a void. So my stepdad was probably more important to me than my bio dad. So that's why I say all of my parents rather than my mom and my dad. So anyway, so being that I'm an adult who has no parents anymore, probably if I could time travel, I would actually go back to a time when they were still here. And it's funny because popping up on my Facebook feed lately are these memories. I don't know if y'all see this on your Facebook, if you're even on Facebook, but occasionally it'll show you old posts from last year, 3 years ago, 10 years ago. So recently this post popped up from 11 years ago where I was talking about going to Liberty Valance, which at the time was the sort of slightly country bar that would do karaoke and stuff on the weekends. And we had a lot of friends that would go and do karaoke. And I would go with my parents. And, you know, we would sit and have dinner, and we would, they'd listen to me sing, and I'd invite friends. And it was this big, huge thing. And it was like a weekly occurrence that I would go here with friends and my parents, because I was one of those weird people that actually enjoyed hanging out with my parents. So, so this post pops up about one of those nights. So if I could time travel, I would probably go back to probably my 30th birthday party, which we had at Liberty Valance. And I invited all of my friends, and my mom and dad and stepdad were there. Actually, my dad was not there. He had already passed. But my mom and stepdad were there. And it was just the most fun thing ever. I still remember it really, really fondly. Singing karaoke all night. One of my friends made this huge cake that looked like one of those Hostess snack cakes with the swirl on top. Yeah, it was a fantastic night. I have so many pictures. And really, when I turned 30, it was like this really big turning point for me. Incidentally, later that year is when I met Adam. So yeah, later that year, I met the man who would become my husband. So that was fun. Let's see. The pauses are me taking a sip of water because I'm talking so much that it's like, ah. Okay, who was your favorite cartoon character as a child? How do I pick just one? I'm trying to think of a specific cartoon that I watched. I used to really love My Little Pony, and I'm talking about like the old school 80s My Little Pony, not the new school Skinny Ponies and Friendship is Magic or whatever. Not that I dislike them, but I'm an old school person. I really miss the old school My Little Ponies. And I don't know if I have a specific favorite of them, but I really love that cartoon. I used to watch Care Bears. I used to watch, oh my gosh, the old school G.I. Joe. Just, yeah, I used to watch so much cartoons, so many cartoons and stuff. I can't think of a specific character who was my favorite, though. I mean, if we're going to talk comic book characters, when I was growing up, my first favorite comic book character was Storm. And I think it was because she was one of the first female superheroes that I saw in a comic book who really had some presence. And at the time, I couldn't have known how to put it in words. You know, now I realize that, you know, she's just much more empowered than a lot of the other characters. She has more going for her than just that she's a pretty person. So that probably was something that attracted me even when I was a kid. It's certainly something that plays in my mind now as an adult. So yeah, that's I guess I'd have to say Storm. She's my favorite cartoon character. I did used to watch the X-Men cartoon too. So there is that. Let me see. What animal best represents you and why? Ugh. Who knows? Like I don't know what animal would represent me. Trying to think. I can't even think. Trying to think of something silly but serious, but I don't know. Maybe I'll come back to that. What words of wisdom would you pass down to your childhood self? Oh my gosh. Okay, so probably knowing now what I know, if I could pass some wisdom on to my younger self, depending on how early I could talk to my younger self, I would be like, talk to your parents about getting tested for ADHD. Like seriously, talk to your parents. You don't know what ADHD is, and that's okay, but you should talk to them about getting tested for it because it is going to help you so much and it is going to change your life. And I say that as an adult with undiagnosed ADHD. I am almost 100% certain that I have ADHD and have had since I was a little kid, and that if I had known what was going on with me that long ago, my life would be completely different now. So now we understand that people with ADHD are neurodivergent, and then that has a lot of meanings and connotations and a lot of things going with it. But we also understand better that just because you're neurodivergent does not mean that you're broken. It just means your brain works differently than quote unquote normal brains. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's a lot about learning how your brain works and how to navigate that in a neurotypical world. And it's something that I'm learning a lot about these days. And surprisingly, I'm learning a lot about it on TikTok, if you can believe it. And I will say this, TikTok has a lot of goofy stuff. There's a lot of weird people doing random stuff that doesn't matter. There's a lot of people doing stuff that you don't want to watch. But there are a lot of people doing really fantastic things on TikTok. There are people talking about mental health. There are people talking about neurodivergency. There are people talking about their own experiences, but there are also people talking about ways to navigate your experience in a neurotypical world. And there are also people who are gay offering support. There are people who are what they call any part of the alphabet mafia, is the new name folks are using for LGBTQIA+, because necessarily LGBTQIA+ is a mouthful. So now we're the alphabet mafia. So yeah, the alphabet mafia is the new term, I guess, all-encompassing term. So anyway, there are folks, there are gay folks, there are trans folks, there are non-binary folks, there are all kinds of folks on TikTok who make it their business to just pump up other people who might be scared or questioning or not have support systems. And this is a fantastic thing to see happening on a platform like that, is just people reaching out to help support and affirm and create a safe space for people who might not have it otherwise. And granted, it takes interacting with those kinds of videos on a consistent basis to continue seeing those kinds of videos. So if you don't interact with that kind of stuff, you'll end up seeing other weird parts of TikTok. But but let me tell you, there are some fantastic people, mental health professionals, folks who have done tons of research on ADHD and how adults with ADHD function in the world, how not to function, how to deal with certain aspects of it, how there are differences between how women experience ADHD versus how men experience ADHD. There is a treasure trove of information on TikTok. So not that I'm trying to sell TikTok or anything like that. I have found so much good stuff on TikTok. So yeah, where was I even going with that? Oh yeah, so I would tell my younger self to learn about ADHD and to get that going early so that I could, as an adult, have more validation that there's nothing wrong with me. For many, many years, and I think I've talked about this over the course of time on the channel, but for the longest time, for most of my life, not even just my adult life, but most of my life, I have believed that there were certain things that were true about me. Things like that I'm lazy or unmotivated or incapable of just doing things that other normal people do. And it turns out that these are not inherent qualities in me. These are things that are a function of or happen because I have ADHD. It's not that I lack motivation, it's that I have issues with executive function. And so even though I desperately want to do the thing, I can't do the thing because my brain doesn't work the same way that a neurotypical person's works to trigger that changeover from thought to action. So even the simple fact of knowing that I'm not broken, I just work differently, is the biggest lift to my self-confidence. I don't know if you can even understand, because all my life, not only have other people said, but I have told myself, why can't you just do the thing? Why can't you just do it? And that's the problem. When you have ADHD, you can't just do it. It's not that simple. So anyway, if you have ADHD, or you think you might have, or think your child or somebody that you care about might have ADHD, I really encourage you to educate yourself, to educate them, and as early as possible to do this, because the more you can help yourself or help them understand that this is just a difference in how their brain works, it's not a function of who they are, as a human being. There's nothing wrong with them. They just need to learn different ways of functioning in a world that's created by neurotypicals. The better off you and they will be. So that's my word of advice to myself and to you. Let's see. These are the randomest questions. Let's see. What's your favorite vacation destination? So far, my favorite vacation destination is Ireland. I've been twice now. I intend to continue going back to Ireland as often as possible. There's a small part of me that wants to make Ireland my retirement plan. So I really love Ireland. There's a part of me, I think, that really connects with Ireland in a much deeper way than I've ever connected with any other geographical place. And it could honestly be because I have a whole lot of Irish ancestry. I don't know, what clan or whatever my family came from directly from Ireland, but I do know that when I did one of those DNA tests from 23andMe, the funniest thing, so my mother spent years trying to track down indigenous ancestry in our family, because she believed strongly, I still believe too, she believed strongly that we had indigenous ancestry, that we were either Cherokee or Creek descendants of, one of those tribes that came primarily or lived primarily in Georgia. She did so much research, and ultimately she couldn't find the connection either through genealogical research nor through DNA research. So it was not surprising, but somewhat funny and also somewhat sad that when I did a 23andMe test, it literally came back that I am 99.7% white. Like, it's hard to be any whiter than I am. And it's frustrating on a couple of levels that I'm not going to go into right now, but I'm 99.7% white, and there's a 0.3% that comes from somewhere in Nigeria, of all things. I think we can all probably guess how that little bit of Nigerian probably got into my family. I'm not aware of any of my family being plantation owners or having owned enslaved people or anything like that. However, when your DNA comes back as 99.7% white and 0.3% Nigerian, you have to wonder. So anyway, of that 99.7% whiteness, a vast majority of it was Irish and Scottish. There's some English, there's some French and German. My dad's family came from Germany when it was still Prussia, and he did tons of genealogical research as well. So he knows that his folks originally came from Prussia, and then he filtered through, and he actually traced his family to the point where they came from Europe on one of the Mayflower voyages. Now, it wasn't like the maiden voyage of the Mayflower. It was some subsequent voyage, so we're not like famous or anything like that. But his folks came over on one of the voyages of the Mayflower way back when. So he traced his family back that far. My mother wasn't able to trace quite that far, but she was able to connect us. I forget whether it's on the Scottish side or the Irish side, to Clan Hamilton somewhere along the way. But regardless, my point was there's a lot of Irish in my background. My dad has some Irish on his side. I think there's a lot of Irish on my mom's side. And, so it's not strange to me that when I go to Ireland, I feel at home. I feel like it's where I came from, which is, it's a very strange thing to say when you didn't go there until you were 30 something for the first time. But when I go to Ireland, it feels like home. So it's my favorite place to vacation. It's my favorite place to go and be. I think, there's just this deep connection for me. Probably a lot of it is too, I've always considered myself to be a water person, an ocean person. Some people love the mountains, some people love the beach, some people love the trees. I am an ocean person. Like, me and the ocean, we're tight. And yeah, so the fact that Ireland is literally an island, you can almost not go anywhere in Ireland that isn't bordered by the sea. I mean, all of it's bordered by the sea, but there's very few places to go in Ireland where you're not on the coast. And part of that is because of the size of Ireland and all this sort of stuff. But certainly if you're in the central part of the country, then you're not near the coast. But so much of Ireland is right on the water, and the water is so gorgeous, and the views are so gorgeous. Oh my gosh, I can't say enough about it. Ireland is fantastic. I can't wait to go back. How do I spend my weekends? Y'all know how I spend my weekends because I talk to y'all about it all the time. So I spend my weekends mostly doing crafty stuff if at all possible. That's not the way it always used to be. It's only been the last 2 or 3 years that I've really gotten to a good place in my mental health where I have the energy and capacity to do all the crafty stuff. But yeah, so now that's what I spend a lot of my time doing. Depending on whether or not the husband is around, depends on whether or not or how much crafting time I actually get in. Because if he's not working, then generally speaking, we're doing stuff together. In the before times, before COVID, we would have friends over and play games and stuff on a Saturday night, have drinks and things like that. We might go watch a movie or hang out and have dinner and things like that. Nowadays, we spend most of our time just at home, hanging out with each other. We're currently rewatching Naruto on Netflix. But yeah, so if he's around, I like to spend time with him because he only gets 2 weekends off a month, the way his work schedule works. But if he is working, then I'm spending lots of time doing crafty stuff. I'm also possibly filming videos for YouTube, or possibly doing Etsy stuff, getting the shop up together, fulfilling orders and things like that. So I do as much as I can to not do work things over the weekend. It's easy with my day job because I turn off my work computer on Friday and I don't turn it back on until Monday. So that part is easy, but I forget sometimes that Etsy is a job as well. And that sometimes even YouTube is a job. And so I tend to forget to put boundaries in place with those things. But lately, as much as possible, if I don't have to deal with an Etsy thing over the weekend, I don't. I save it for the weekday when I can deal with it while I'm already working, which is to say on a day that I already have to work anyway, versus taking one of my days off and making myself work when I'm off work. So yeah, so that's what I generally do on the weekends. Who's your favorite actor or actress? Do I have to pick just one? Because this is a contextual kind of thing. This is not like you have to tell me like in a specific movie or a specific genre. Like there are too many good actors and actresses. Ryan Reynolds is one of my absolute favorite actors. For me, he's like the total package. He is incredibly good looking, but he's so snarky and so sarcastic and so funny and goofy. So he's like the all of everything. So I guess if I'm gonna pick my favorite actor that I might like to have a relationship with, it's gonna be Ryan Reynolds. But I will also say Gal Gadot is one of my favorites. She is such an elegant and she's majestic just in her carriage and her bearing. She's such a fantastic pick for the role of Wonder Woman because she really has that feeling of being a goddess, of being more than human, and it's really all encompassing. So it's really sad that the movies haven't been better than they are because she is fantastic, and she so far outshines anything that they have done in those movies. She's probably the only saving grace for a lot of the DC stuff. So that's just my personal opinion. Back in the day when I was younger, one of my favorite actresses was Angelina Jolie. I used to love her. I fell in love with her in Hackers from God, when was that? The early 90s or something? Hackers, for those who are not familiar, was like back in the early days of, computer tech stuff. And she was a hacker, and Johnny Lee Miller was her counterpoint, or counterparts, and they were both like super duper hackers, and they had to like foil this conspiracy theory or something like that. I can't remember even what the full plot of the movie is, but I loved them both so much in that movie. And I started following her at that point. So I watched Gia, and I watched Gone in 60 Seconds and Girl Interrupted, like every Angelina Jolie movie up until she did Tomb Raider, I think. I think Tomb Raider is when I kind of like lost interest in continuing to follow her career, because I lost a little bit of respect for her in Tomb Raider, but it's a whole other story. Um, let's see. If you could turn anything into an Olympic sport, what would I win the gold medal for? Um, Procrastination. I could win a gold medal for procrastination because I can procrastinate like nobody's business. I'd love to say cross stitching, that I could win a gold medal for cross stitching, but cross stitching is one of those things where I feel like I'm a great cross stitcher. Now, am I going to win awards? Well, I don't know. It depends on what your standards are. I'm not a fast stitcher. Um, I think I'm a really detailed and meticulous stitcher, but even then, I'm sure there are better stitchers than I am. So I don't think I'd win a gold medal for stitching, but procrastinating, absolutely. And probably for rambling. Like, I think I could ramble for ages. I certainly feel like I do when I make videos. Okay, let's see. What other questions do we have? I'm trying to figure out which ones. Da, 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 da. Okay. Where did you grow up? Where do you currently live? How tall are you? Funny. Okay, we're not answering those. Okay. Um, let's see. Who is your hero? Wow. This is another one of those where I kind of need some context. Like, my hero, for, are we talking superhero? Are we talking normal person who does amazing things? Um, there are a lot of heroes. Oh, goodness. I could say so many things here. So, I think one of my heroes, because I have a lot of heroes, one of my heroes, I think, is Barack Obama, for a lot of different reasons, but primarily because I miss so much having him and Michelle in office. I miss the way they represented our country as a whole. So say whatever you want to about his politics and the things he did or didn't do while in office, but the person he was for America was pretty freaking awesome. And the partnership and the couple that he and Michelle Obama were while he was in office was phenomenal, and was something to look up to for everybody. Not just for people of color, but for all of us. It was something to aspire to, because um, Michelle Obama wasn't just a piece of arm candy that Barack paraded around while he was president. She was her own person, and she was his partner and his equal. And it's important for women to see that you know obviously we want a woman president someday. We want a woman to be the person in the seat of power, but to see a woman standing next to the person in power and know that she is powerful too, that she has her own thing going on, that she is making change and she's doing fantastic things in the country, even though she's not the person in power. I mean, it's something that's important to see. But their relationship together was important for America. The whole family's relationship was important for America to see. They were such a wholesome group of people, and the two of them were so charismatic in such a fantastic way. So yeah, I mean, both of them are my heroes, and I miss them. I miss them so much, especially. I mean, I'm not going to get into the whole thing, but the last 4 years. Oh my gosh. I miss Michelle and Barack Obama so much. Other heroes, more attainable heroes. There are several folks that I follow on YouTube that I consider my heroes, because they help me to feel more confident and more courageous in standing up and speaking my truth. And there are a whole bunch of them. But you know, two that I mention all the time are Rachel Ray, who is a close friend of mine and has been for many years, and also Michelle G of Bendy Stitchy. Both of them have really inspired me in so many ways, not just in being more active as an activist, but also just in doing what I do and letting that be enough. Because Rachel has told me for a long time to just, you know, if I'm going to have a YouTube channel, just be myself, just do what I do. So I have been doing my best to do that. I try to just give y'all me. I don't try to put on any kind of extra anything. I try to just give you who I am, because that's all I can give. I don't have time or energy to come up with a fake personality to give y'all. I really don't. And you know, if you can't enjoy me as I am, then you know that's cool. You don't have to. You don't have to like everybody that you run across in real life or in YouTube. So it's cool. I just put myself on here. Rachel was the one who inspired me to not only even try doing YouTube, but to just be myself and to know that no matter what, being myself is good enough. And Michelle, just in the way that she is on her YouTube, has inspired me in the same ways. But also both of them being willing to be strong enough to stand up and go, this is what I believe. And it's okay if you don't agree with me. You know, we can have a conversation. But this is what I believe, and you're not going to tell me differently, or you're not going to make me be silent. Those have been very big, important things for me. So, if you could live anywhere, where would it be? Ireland. We already covered that. Unless we're going to talk about, like, you know, no holds barred, money is no object. Well, no, I'd probably still live in Ireland. Yeah, because if I had tons of money, I could live in Ireland and still get all my craft supplies, and it wouldn't be a big deal because money would be no object. Okay, what is your biggest fear? Ugh, biggest fear. I don't have fears like other people have fears. Like, I'm not afraid of the S word, the eight-legged S word. I'm not afraid of, I'm not afraid of no ghosts. I'm afraid of failure. That's probably my biggest fear. Failure and not being good enough. So yeah, that's the real honest answer is I'm afraid of failure and I'm afraid of not being good enough. Yeah, I don't know what else there is to say about that. Those are the things that I've been fighting with my whole life pretty much. What's your favorite family vacation? Well, I already talked about where I like to go. Let me think. What was a favorite vacation? Well, my family always used to go to, and I talked about this somewhat recently, like back in October. My family always used to go to Duck, North Carolina, over the summer, like the last week or first week in August or something like that. We had a timeshare in Duck, North Carolina, and so that was our family vacation every year. We would go to the beach. And those are some of the best memories. The North Carolina beach used to be my favorite beach on the planet. Now I've been to Ireland, so it's a little bit different, but it's still one of my favorite beaches on the planet. And North Carolina used to feel like my second home. So that was probably, I can't remember like a specific vacation, because we used to go every year. So it's kind of like all one amalgamated image in my mind these days, but that was really good. What would you change about yourself if you could? I think I've already touched on this too. Like, probably the biggest thing, like if I could change a thing, I would want to go back and just inform myself of what ADHD is and how that's affected my life. And yeah, I mean, that would be the biggest thing is I wouldn't necessarily change who I am. I don't want to change who I am. I like who I am. But I I would like to give myself the opportunity to just have better knowledge earlier in my life, so that I could have been kinder to myself when I was younger, or not even when I was younger, so I could have been kinder to myself over the years, and not beat myself up so much for things that weren't really in my power. What makes you really angry? Or what really makes you angry? Either way. Lots of things make me angry. One specific thing, I, ignorance. Ignorance really makes me angry. Willful ignorance, more so. When you can see evidence of a thing in the world and you choose to ignore it, or you choose to pretend that it is not a problem, that makes me angry. Because I think as human beings, it's totally okay to get new information and to change your mind about what you used to believe based on new information. And it's totally okay to say, well, I used to think a thing, but now I have more information and I understand that I was wrong. It's okay to say that you're wrong. But when you're so worried about not being wrong that you choose to ignore what is really the truth, and you choose to continue to be part of a system that is broken because you just don't want to be wrong, that makes me angry. So, trying not to get too political with any of this stuff, but yeah. I think you can guess where I'm going with that. What motivates you to work hard? Motivation is such a weird thing for me. Because your typical motivators have not worked for me. Like, I'm not a, punishment and reward motivated person. Which I'm only just realizing, now that I'm learning more about how my brain works. I'm understanding that the reason that the reward and punishment model doesn't work for me because of how my brain works. Because if you're the kind of person who can just get up and do a thing, then being rewarded for getting up and doing the thing works. When you're the kind of person who has to fight with yourself to get up and do the thing, then the punishment reward thing doesn't work, because you're constantly beating yourself up for not doing the thing. So, how do I get motivated? I don't know. I really don't know. That's not completely true. I think the things that motivate me to work hard are knowing that the work I'm doing is appreciated. So, like, you could say, if I finish this job, I'll get $1,000. Or you could say that you really appreciate the work I'm doing, and you feel like if I do this thing, it's going to create a way for this thing to work and for those people to do what they need to do, and blah, 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 blah. And it's that second thing that's going to motivate me more, because I know the work I'm doing is appreciated, it's needed, it's necessary, and that it's going to do good overall, versus I'm going to get $1,000. Now, I want that $1,000, and if I can have both, that's great. But the more motivating thing to me is knowing that the work I'm doing is appreciated, that it's important, and that it's making a difference. That's what matters to me. Let's see. I'm getting close to time, which is why I'm kind of like taking a breath, because I'm like, how many more questions can I answer? Trying to keep this to an hour so that we can put it in Mrs. Coffee's challenge. I want at least an hour, not more than an hour. Let's see. What's your favorite thing about your career? Let's see. So I've talked about working for the state. I've talked about the fact that I work in economic development. So my favorite thing about the work that I do, the organization that I work for, is the fact that we are helping to create more jobs in the Commonwealth of Virginia. So it's a really awesome thing. A lot of times it can feel like it's just about money. It's just about, moving a big company from here to there and that kind of stuff. But the reality is, anytime a company expands, If they come to Virginia, that's creating more jobs for Virginians, and that's a really motivating thing. It's the reason that I started working for the agency. Is the reason, one of the biggest reasons that I've continued working for the agency, because what we do ultimately creates a better life for people in Virginia, and that's awesome. What is the biggest complaint about your jobs? What is your biggest complaint about your job? Sometimes it's like herding cats, and that's all I will say. Especially because a large part of what I do is working with the data, so making sure that the data gets put into the system correctly. Anyway, I'm not going to go into detail. What is your proudest accomplishment? Oh my gosh. Well, I was pretty proud when I became the first person in my family to graduate with a bachelor's degree. That was a pretty proud moment. I was also really proud of myself when I finished my master's in business, because already I had been the first person in my family to ever get a bachelor's, and now I'm the first person in my family to ever get a master's. So I'm pretty proud of those things. I'm also pretty proud of myself for the work that I've done on my mental health in the last couple of years, because not so long ago, I would never have been able to do what I'm doing right this minute, which is talking to you all and sharing this information and sharing my crafts with you. And it's not really because I would have been too nervous to talk about it on camera or to share it on YouTube, but because I couldn't craft. I couldn't be creative. I spent most of my time wishing that I could. Sitting on the couch and thinking hard about how much I wish I was doing a crafty thing, or I wish I was cleaning the kitchen, or I wish I had the energy to do this or that or the other. For years, I felt like that. And it was only after my mother passed and I realized how hard life had gotten, and how much better life could be, that I finally got help. And I'm proud of myself for taking that step. Because asking for help can be the hardest thing to do. It's hard enough to recognize when you're struggling, and when you're having a hard time, and when it's too much for you to handle on your own. And it's a whole other level to actually take the step of recognizing that you need help and getting the help. So I'm proud of myself for getting help, for starting to see a therapist, and starting to get a handle on not only my grief, but the depression that I'd been dealing with for years. So because of that, I can do this today. And I can share my crafty stuff with you every week, and I can show you all my projects. And even though I still use too much negative self-talk, because even when I'm talking to you on my videos, I start out with, I didn't do much this week. So I still have a lot of work to do, but I'm so proud of myself for taking that first step and for sticking with it, and for being willing to understand that I can see a thing that I'm not doing correctly, and I can change that behavior, but I don't have to beat myself up over things. So I'm very proud of that. And if you're in that situation, if you're sitting there thinking that you need help and you don't know how to ask for it, or you're afraid to ask for it, I hope that you will take those steps to find out what help you need, and to find out how to get that help that you need, because there's nothing that is going to make you feel better. There's nothing that's going to be more rewarding than putting that time and energy into yourself to make you feel better. Let's see. What is my child's proudest accomplishment? I can't tell you what my stepkid's proudest accomplishment is, though I will say they love their artwork. And their artwork is pretty awesome for their age. I don't know, I don't know how proud they are that they came out to us. I hope that they're proud that they had the courage to do that. But yeah, that was an interesting conversation. It's been, I guess, 2 years ago now, 2.5 years ago, that they came out and told us that they were not only non-binary but also asexual and possibly aromantic. So for those who are uninitiated, asexual means that you're a person who has no sexual interest. And there are different degrees of this, but that's the basic gist of it. Aromantic means that you're not interested in romantic relationships. Excuse me. So as an aro ace, as they call it, they're not interested in either sexual or romantic relationships, which doesn't mean they don't want to have friendships and stuff. They're just not interested in having sex or having a romantic connection to somebody. And that's been something that's been difficult to wrap my brain around, not because I don't accept them and who they are, but because I just don't understand. I don't understand it. I wasn't conditioned to know that there's anything different than sexual and romantic relationships. So, I mean, we have friendships and then we have our partnerships with our sexual and romantic partners. And to try to understand what it means to not want those things, it has been difficult for me to wrap my brain around. But I work on it every day. Just like I work on understanding what it means to be non-binary and how I can be the best ally I can be. And there's a fantastic person on TikTok. Their name is Finn Gerhardt. And they're fantastic because their whole thing with their TikTok is to teach people how to be better allies and also to affirm non-binary people and trans people. They're fantastic. If you're on TikTok, check out Finn Gerhardt. They're fantastic. I love it. So anyway, I hope that my stepkid is proud of having come out because it takes a lot of courage. Even if you know that the people that you're telling are going to be supportive and loving, there's still always that question because you think you know people, but do you know people? So it's hard. It's a scary thing. So I'm very proud of them for coming out to us. I hope they're proud of it too. What is your favorite book to read? This sounds like an odd question. I'm getting really close to time too. I'm just gonna call this "What is my favorite book?" And again, do I have to pick just one? I love. Well, okay. My favorite single book is the audio version of Ocean at the End of the Lane by Neil Gaiman. Neil Gaiman narrates his own book in the audiobook version, and it is one of the most fantastic experiences I've ever had for literature. Hearing him read his own work is like he's a consummate storyteller. So it's not just him reading to you, it's him telling you the story. And it's just so much more luscious and vibrant and meaningful. It's my favorite book, hands down. If I was told I could only have one book to read/listen to for the rest of my life, I could be happy with that one. Other books that I really love, I really like the Stormlight Archives by Brandon Sanderson. There's a fourth book in the series now, which I haven't started listening to. It is a massive epic fantasy. So on audio, each book is at least 40 hours long. So for an audiobook, that's massive. A lot of your standard novels run closer to like 8 to 15 hours. So Brandon Sanderson's run at least 40 hours, if not more. But they are fantastic. Fantastic fantasy. I can't recommend it enough. And he goes to such great lengths to make sure that there's consistency, that the story makes sense, that the characters don't disappear. Pardon me. So yeah, a fantastic series. Another series that I really like is The King Killer Chronicles by Patrick Rothfuss. In some ways not as good as Sanderson's, but the characters are really interesting. I loved listening to it on audio. Definitely worth the listen. Also nearly as epic. Give me just a second. But yeah, very, very, very long books. And he takes significantly longer to finish his novels than some other authors. So I think it's been like I want to say it was like 10 or 15 years between the second and the last two books that came out. So now we're anxiously awaiting the next book, and goodness only knows if it will happen before he dies. So anyway, other books that I absolutely love. I always have loved Anne McCaffrey. Almost anything that I've ever read from Anne McCaffrey. I loved her series that was the Rowan series, which is based on, in the future, on folks who are telekinetic, like a whole dynasty of telekinetic folks. I really loved that, telepathic and telekinetic. And then, of course, the Pern books, which are all about dragons that, spoilers, dragons that you find out are actually genetically engineered. It's like, oh my gosh. So it starts out as this whole series of fantasy books, and then somewhere halfway through the series, you realize that it's actually science fiction, because it turns out that people landed on this planet from somewhere else, and everything is the way it is because they genetically engineered it. Like, oh my gosh. Yeah. So, spoilers, sorry, but but yeah, that's a fantastic series. I don't know that it's holding up as well now that it's as old as it is, but it's still a really good series. Also, Spider Robinson. Let me just throw this in. Pretty much anything by Spider Robinson, but the Callahan Chronicles. If you are ever in a place where you need help mentally, you should read the Callahan Chronicles, because those books have saved people's lives. You should read those. I don't know how to talk about it without crying. I really don't. My brother and I have shared a bond over those books for a lot of reasons. Maybe someday I'll be able to talk about it. Right now I'm getting too weepy trying to even think about it. So anyway, Spider Robinson, Callahan Chronicles, check it out. So yeah. Okay, maybe one more question and then I'll have to go. What was the last movie you went to? What did you think? Okay. The last movie I went to in the theater was sort of, I guess, halfway through pandemic times. I went to see Tenet. And I thought it was fantastic. It was a huge box office flop, I think. But I thought it was fantastic. The problem with Tenet is the same problem that a lot of movies like it face, is that I think it makes you think too much. And a lot of people going to movies don't want to think that hard. They don't want to have to understand what's going on with the story. They don't want to have to question and wonder, and they certainly don't like it when they don't get the information immediately as things are happening. So anytime you're watching a movie and you have to sit with the discomfort of not understanding things, but then they're explained later in the movie, a lot of people are not okay with that. I'm okay with that as long as I get that payoff at the end. Now, if I watch the entire movie and I never get told what the hell the point was, that bothers me. But Tenet doesn't do that. Tenet connects all the dots, and it leaves you with more questions, but they're not questions about what happened. It's questions about how things could work, what could go on next. It's like, it was really, really good. And it was one of the only things I've seen Robert Pattinson in that I actually enjoyed. But to be fair, I haven't seen him in much except Harry Potter and the Twilight series. And the Twilight series is awful. Fight me. It is what it is. No, I have no shade if you love Twilight series. It's just not my bag. It's okay. Okay. Let's see. I'm looking and I have 2 minutes left. One more question. One more question. What did you want to be when you were small? I wanted to be a geneticist. Yeah, I don't know. I can't remember how I got there. There was a time when I wanted to be a marine scientist or marine biologist. And then as we started looking at genes and how genes worked and how DNA worked, I was like, I want to be a geneticist. I want to study this stuff. This is what I want to do with my life. And then somehow I ended up in art school. And that's such a long story. I don't even know how to get into it. But yeah, there was a time in my life where I was determined I was going to be a geneticist. And I think that lasted until I got to high school. And I went to a magnet school for math and science. It was a pilot program. It was a whole lot of new things. And I had a really difficult time with it. And I think that was probably what killed my desire to become a geneticist. So, which is unfortunate, but you know, it is what it is. So. Okay, folks, well, I'm going to wrap it up here. I do have more video for you to see at some point, so I'll probably do a part 2 or at least another WIP Chat at some point. But I want to thank you for joining me today. I hope you have had fun while I've been chatting and rambling and talking about whatever randomness I've talked about. I hope I've given you some laughs. I hope I've given you some things to think about, but mostly I hope that you've just enjoyed yourself, and this is, you know, given you some time away from other things. So, and as always, this is your reminder to make sure that you stay hydrated, make sure you take your meds if you need them, and remember that good enough is good enough. And I will see you all again later. Have a great one.